Thank you. Great. Great. Hi, everybody. Keep coming in. Everybody slowly filtering in. This is great. Great. Well, it's nice when people put in where they're from in our chat. So that's great. Thank you. Great. Yay. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. See names of people who were here before, so welcome. It's great to see older names from before and also new names. You're in the right place if you're here for the webinar. We're just waiting for everybody to get here. Oh my God, our friend from Australia is here. Welcome. Yay. This is exciting. Okay, we got a little bit more. I think we're going to be good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. We still have a number of people logging in, so we're going to give them a minute or two to get settled, and we'll get underway at 1 o'clock, the official start time. Great. I just recognize a name I remember from the past. Hi, Erica. It's exciting, for some of us who've been around a long time, we see names we recognize. Okay. Thank you. We're so excited when we have people here that are also that are new and are here for the first time. So really, thank you for being here and taking the time with us. Oops. My dog is in back of here. If you hear castanets, it's his harness going, and I should probably take it off, but he usually is pretty quiet. So bear with us. At this point, I'll make the announcement later, but we're not using the raised hand feature. You could write, if you have a question, you can put it in chat for us and we can respond there. So thank you. It's about 2 minutes before we officially start the webinar at 1 o'clock. Great. Thank you for coming. You know, most places it's probably beautiful out, so to spend a nice part of the day with us is really, it's really appreciated, and we really thank you for that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. Great. We have people from all over the country and Canada and Australia with us, so great. Welcome everybody. Okay. We're going to get ready to probably start pretty soon. So everybody, thank you for being with us and welcome. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, hello. And thank you so much for joining us for today's webinar, which is Behavioral Changes that Occur with Aging and Dementia. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kathy Service, and I am a nurse practitioner. I am also on the board of directors of the National Task Group and the facilitators from the NTG's online family support group for those families who have a member with intellectual disabilities who is also living with dementia. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the NTG, NTG stands for National Task Group on Intellectual Disabilities and Dementia Practices. And we are a national, a 501c3, a not-for-profit organization, and our mission is to advocate for services and supports for people with an intellectual disability who are affected by Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, and for their families and for paid staff and for agencies also. And we do this through a series of activities, through federal advocacy efforts, producing materials, which include practice guidelines, screening tools, education, training curricula, workshops, agency and family-based information, and other technical materials, as well as provision of technical assistance, all on dementia and really with the focus on for people with intellectual disabilities. And before I introduce our moderator, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping tasks here. So first of all, everybody is muted for this. And entering, you need to enter technology-related questions about the webinars or where can I get the previous webinars in the chat box. Questions related to the topic on hand should be entered in the Q&A, not the chat box. Okay. Today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be able to share a link with you within 72 hours after the event is complete. This recording will also be posted on the NTG website, and you'll be getting information about the NTG website throughout this process and in some of the materials that you will be getting later on. Language translation is available for closed caption, and as a participant, you can self-enable these captions and switch languages by clicking on the Show Captions little caret arrow at the bottom of your screen. We also invite your comments and questions. Please look at the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. If you think of a question for the speaker at any point in the presentation, click on that button and type your question right in there. And I'll hold it for the discussion portion at the end of the presentation. Please don't put your questions in the chat box. The chat box is just for technical questions that don't relate to the webinar content. Also, we won't be using the raised hand feature during today's webinar, so please don't use that. You can write things in, if it's a topic related in the Q&A or technical in the chat box. So, and at the conclusion of the webinar, there's going to be a brief survey that we'd really, really like you to complete, because it provides us feedback about today's webinar, and it also enables us to kind of tailor any future webinars to what the needs are for you all. And the survey link and QR code, here Marianne has given it on the PowerPoint here, are displayed on the screen. And so I am so delighted to introduce a colleague from the NTG's Board of Directors who has also become a treasured friend and is today's moderator. Please help me welcome Marianne Barbera, who is the chair of the NTG's Family Support Committee. She'll tell you about herself and introduce our speaker. So welcome, Marianne. Thanks.
Thank you, Kathy, for your kind words. I have had the honor and privilege of working collaboratively and closely with Kathy as we have focused on attending to families' needs. We have become great friends in the process. For those of you who attended our previous webinars on the process of aging, early screening for cognitive changes, and life planning for different phases of the life journey, we welcome you back. For those of you that hadn't registered for those webinars, we welcome you today to our fourth webinar. The recordings for prior webinars are located on the NTG's website. It is an honor and privilege to be part of today's webinar as a moderator. Before I introduce today's speaker, let me tell you a little about myself and my involvement with NTG. In 2016, my beautiful beloved sister, who was an individual born with Down syndrome, started showing signs of cognitive decline. As I began my search for reputable resources and support to help guide me in learning more, so I could provide the best care possible for her, I found myself unable to find the resources and support I so desperately wanted and needed. Over the course of the next several years, I did locate some helpful resources, but it wasn't until 2021 that I learned about NTG and the extremely valuable reputable resources and monthly support group that they offer. I was so overwhelmed with gratitude for finding what I needed that I made a promise to myself in honor of my beloved sister that I would do my part to help minimize the likelihood that other families may experience the same difficulty in finding the information and support they need. As a result, I became part of NTG's Family Support Committee, was elected to become a member of the board, and eventually became chair of the Family Support Committee. I am also involved with our monthly virtual support group, assisting our facilitator, Kathy Service, who you just met a few moments ago, and sharing my lived experience with the group members. With this involvement, myself and many other board members and committee members created an IRB-approved survey to ascertain what families felt they needed regarding aging and caring for their loved one with an intellectual disability. The results of the survey indicated a few key areas which helped us to create our very first family webinar series, which has been an ongoing collaborative effort from NTG's board members, committee members, and our director of operations. Today's session is the fourth part of that webinar series. Additionally, I'd like to mention that this webinar series is able to be offered to you free of charge due to the generous donation from a family that wishes to remain anonymous. So at this time, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to today's speaker, Katie Frank, who will speak about behavioral changes that occur with aging and dementia. Katie Frank has worked as an occupational therapist at the Adult Down Syndrome Center since 2016 and in the field of occupational therapy since 2001. She is the immediate past president of the Down Syndrome Medical Interest Group USA. Dr. Frank earned her degree in occupational therapy from St. Louis University and her PhD in disability studies from the University of Illinois at Chicago. Most of her work has been with individuals with Down syndrome of all ages. Dr. Frank's experience includes treatment and evaluation, as well as facilitating groups for people with Down syndrome, conducting trainings for staff, families, and caregivers, and offering a variety of other educational opportunities across the United States. Her research has been published in peer-reviewed journals. At this time, I am going to turn the floor over to our presenter, Dr. Katie Frank.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marianne and Kathy and everyone at NTG for inviting me to speak today. And go to the next slide. This is just a reminder that the information provided for you today is for educational purposes only and not intended to serve as a substitute for any medical, psychiatric, mental health, or behavioral evaluation, diagnosis, or treatment. And so I recommend that you bring your questions to your loved one's medical provider or someone else in your community. Next slide. So just like Marianne, my why is because of my sister. So in 1984, my sister Tori was born with Down syndrome and then unfortunately passed away in 1987. But because of her very brief life, she has motivated me to do the work that I do today. Next slide. We're going to today focus a little bit on the behavioral changes that occur with aging, but mostly focus on the non-medicinal strategies to support the changing needs that arise, because these non-medicinal strategies, are going to help to alleviate and support some of the behavioral changes. So let's focus on behavioral changes. We can go to the, yep, perfect. So here is a long list of some of the things that we may or may not see as an individual with intellectual disability ages. So when it comes to cognition, we could see memory loss, increase in confusion, some challenges with problem solving. Perhaps they seem to forget how to complete some self-care tasks. Maybe it's feeding themselves. It could be using the toilet, maybe bathing. Maybe they just lack the desire to complete self-care tasks. We may see a change in speech and language. So they may end up having trouble finding the right words to use. We may see an increase in verbal aggression and just yelling that seems non-purposeful. Unfortunately, there could be some physical aggression that we see as one ages, either towards themselves or others. They prefer to be more alone. They may wander, especially at night. And then as far as the psychological changes, we may see depression, anxiety, agitation, and then sleep challenges, either reversing their sleep-wake cycle, perhaps just having trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, not able to fall back asleep if they wake up in the middle of the night on their own, just needing more assistance. So there's some questions, I guess it is, that we can ask ourselves in order to understand these behavioral changes. And so the first thing we really need to do is examine the behavior. You know, what happened? Did someone trigger it? Could the person be in pain, or is it related to their medical illness, medications or illness? So the person that seems to appear agitated, what could have triggered it? Let's consider the environment. Is something different in the environment, or did something change? Was there a loud sound? You know, what time of day is it? Do they need to use the restroom, or did they have an accident? Is it a mealtime? These are all things we basically have to be detectives when we see some of these behaviors to figure out how best to support the individual. You know, and so then we want to explore the possible solutions and try different responses. And we're going to talk about some of those responses in the next few slides, but really it's important to remain calm, give them space, and then it also allows us to have time to kind of figure out what our best solution is. So some of the causes for behavioral changes could be physical pain. And again, this could be hard for us to identify. So it's just something to make sure we need to rule out. Perhaps the environment is just overstimulating. Again, it could be because of the different sounds that are happening. There could be a lot going on visually. So a lot of visual overstimulation or auditory overstimulation can be a problem. Perhaps you have different clothes on them that day, and so that tactile feeling is really overstimulating for them. Or if it's a mealtime and they're eating really spicy food or really crunchy food or something like that, that can be overstimulating to their sensory system. Perhaps it's an unfamiliar surrounding. Maybe you brought them to the doctor's office and it's a new doctor's office, or a family member moved and you brought them to their house and that's just unfamiliar, even though there's familiar people around. Again, maybe you just change something up in your home and that can be overwhelming for them. We could see behavioral changes with frustration, especially if they're starting to notice some of their maybe periods of confusion or their memory loss or their understanding their lack of ability to complete some of those tasks that they once were able to do. They can become very frustrated with themselves. Perhaps they're frustrated because you're not understanding what they need. And then we might also see behavioral changes with boredom because you're not able to, as they age, perhaps get them to be as involved as they were, even in preferred leisure interests at home, whether it's word searches or coloring or watching TV. And so then they're just sitting there and then they don't really know what else to do. So we might see some of these behavioral changes. So what can we do? The first thing we really want to do is acknowledge how they may be feeling. You look really frustrated right now. It seems like you're sad or whatever it might be, so that they can kind of match how they're feeling with the actual word. When possible, you really want to try to anticipate stressful events, because as you care for this individual longer and longer, you start to understand what some of these triggering events or situations might be. And so you want to try to anticipate that and make changes to the environment if you can in order to allow for success. And then you can provide distraction or other pleasurable activities. So like you start to see maybe that they're escalating a little bit. Perhaps you turn on their favorite song or sing to them or their favorite TV show, or offer a snack that they like, or give them water, whatever it might be. Because again, you know this individual best and what their needs are, even if they can't tell you what those are. But let's really focus on these non-medicinal strategies, because again, as a non-physician, I can't talk to you about what the possible medications would be to assist, but I can talk about all of these different strategies. So here are a list of some of the things that we're going to be talking about, whether it's changing the environment, using other tools to ensure success, incorporating sensory diets or other sensory strategies in order to support their sensory needs, utilizing visual supports, and we'll talk a little bit about that, and then ways to facilitate communication. So let's start with home safety. And I think this is really important regardless of behavior changes, just to make sure that as the individual is aging, we have a great environment for them in order to ensure their success. So the first thing is to make sure you have contrasting colors in the bathroom. This is because as individuals with ID age, it's not that their vision changes so much, and it's not that they have macular degeneration, but they almost get like a tunnel vision. And so we need to make sure that we're providing contrast, not just in the bathroom, but throughout the home in order to help them be successful. So again, if they're supposed to sit on a white toilet, that happens to be on a white floor with white walls, they're not necessarily going to know where to sit. So if we can change the color of the toilet seat or change the flooring or something like that, then we can make sure that we're enabling more success, because they can see then where the toilet is. We want to make sure that there's adequate lighting in rooms and hallways. We want to try to limit shadows, because shadows can be really upsetting for individuals as they age. Removing unnecessary furniture, especially to make sure that they don't trip over them. So it's more of a safety issue than it is a cognitive issue. But also you may need to remove mirrors or cover mirrors, because again, as someone with intellectual disability ages, that might, when they see themselves in the mirror, they may not recognize themselves and they might think that that's an intruder. And so that can be really alarming to them. If there's stairs, you might want to add handrails. You might even need to, especially in the front of the house, if there's a few steps, you might need to replace it with a ramp. Although that can also be challenging as one ages. Again, because of that more tunnel vision, we see that changes from different flooring or different textures, walking over like a crack or into an elevator, or walking at an angle can all be very challenging. Yet, even just yesterday, I was told that there's an individual with Down syndrome who is aging and probably is going to be diagnosed with Alzheimer's soon. And at his group home, there is a black floor mat in front of the door. And so he jumps over that floor mat every time he goes to leave the house because in his mind, it's a hole. And so the group home is aware of that and they're probably going to make changes. And this also kind of goes along with adding reflective tape on stairs. So if there's carpet, it's probably all the same color or pattern. Outside, it may all be concrete or wood or stone. And so again, there's not contrast. And so we want to make sure to provide that contrast by adding reflective tape, again, just to help that person maneuver up and down steps more safely. And you'll see that you can keep it with here, but there are a lot of these pictures have links to them. So we have a variety of resources at the Adult Down Syndrome Center in our resource library. And so these are all links to resources in our library. All right, other additional things that we want to do in order to ensure home safety is make sure that chairs have armrests to help with sitting and standing. It can be really challenging to try to get up from a chair or any kind of seated surface if there are not handrails or armrests. That just gives them a little bit more ability to use their arms and not just their legs to stand up and also sit down. You want to remove throw rugs as much as possible unless you can make sure that they are fully fixed to the floor, which you can get tape to do that. But that's just an easy thing for an individual to trip on, or if they happen to be using a walker, the walker could get caught on it and they could fall. If they're having wandering issues or elopement issues, you might want to add a deadbolt out of reach. And so if your loved one has Down syndrome, that's probably not too hard to make it out of reach because individuals with Down syndrome tend to be on the shorter side, but just making sure there's that extra protection to ensure their safety and allow you to feel more confident having them in the home with you without having to keep your eyes on them 24 hours a day. But with that, you do want to make sure to lock up medications and cleaning supplies so that they don't get into them when you aren't around. Removing locks on the interior doors so that they don't accidentally lock themselves into a room unless you have an easy way to unlock the door from the outside. You might want to close curtains at night, again, just to help them so that they don't become alarmed if there's light coming in or they see shadows or things like that. And then you want to turn down the volume on the TV before changing channels and also maybe even when turning off the TV, because again, when you change the channel, sometimes the sound could be louder on a different station. And so again, you just want to try to keep the environment calm and not have some alerting sounds. So that's home safety. But now we're going to address some of the adaptive equipment that can be really helpful to, again, ensure success for individuals as they age. So as we age, our sensory system changes and we may not feel regular utensils in our hands, or we might be really shaky and have some tremors. And so for that, using weighted utensils could be really helpful for someone as they age, because if they can feel that utensil in their hand, then they're more likely to use it. You can locate weighted utensils online. Amazon carries a variety. The thing that's really tricky about some of this adaptive equipment or even some of the home safety recommendations is trying to avoid using therapy catalogs because the items tend to be more overpriced if you were to get them from a therapy catalog. Another thing that might be helpful is curved utensils. So again, they're going to not curve up and down. They're going to curve like in towards you. So if you're right-handed and you hold the spoon, the bowl of the spoon curves in towards me so that I can scoop and bring to my mouth without worrying about a lot of wrist rotation. You might want to consider adaptive plates. So on this page, there's a divided plate that can make it easier again to provide more contrast and then see the variety of food. And then the blue dish is called a scoop dish. And again, that's going to make it easier using a fork or a spoon to load your utensil if they can push it onto the scoop, and then it just loads for them if they can't spear. Just like in the bathroom, you want to use contrasting colors, because if you have white food on a white plate on a white table or placemat, they're not going to see the food, and you might be like, why aren't they eating? And it's because, again, with that tunnel vision, it's just out of sight, out of mind. But if you can put the food on a different color plate just to provide that contrast, that's going to be very helpful. You might want to consider a shower chair. And so there's a few different kinds. If you have a stand-up shower, just the chair that sits in the shower will be great. If you have a bathtub, you might need a transfer tub bench. So that is where four of the legs are inside the tub, but then there's 2 legs and a kind of like an extended seat outside the tub, so they can sit down and just swing their legs in. That's not going to work if there's shower doors on your bathtub, but it will if you have a shower curtain. A handheld shower head is going to be great if you for a couple reasons. One, just ease of, if you're assisting with their bathing, you can get the water without them having to move very much, because you can move the shower head more, they can be more independent. But then the other thing, again, as their vision changes, bathing can be very scary, and they don't know where the water's coming from if it's just coming from the regular shower head. So again, we might see some behavioral changes when it comes to showers, because they're scared of the water hitting them. But if they can see it from the handheld shower head, it's much more calming for them. You may need grab bars in the shower, just in the bathroom, around the toilet. You might need rails for the toilet or a raised toilet seat, again, because they're going to have trouble getting up and down more easily. And unless you have an ADA height toilet, if you have a really low toilet, it can be challenging, especially without the rails to, again, stand up from that. So now we're going to focus on our sensory system. And here the light is on, and I want you to think about your sensory system being like electrical wiring. So here, everything is intact in the person's body, so the light is on. But Marianne, before you change the slide, this next slide should have a flickering light on it. So I just wanted to warn you all, because in case you have seizures or are sensitive to that. So Marianne, if you can just show the slide for like 2 seconds and then change, but I'll keep talking about what is on it. All right, wonderful. So when there is a kink in the wire, it might cause our lights to flicker. And so we can get a kink in our central nervous system, and that's going to lead to mixed messages being sent from our brain to where it needs to go in the rest of the body. And so when this happens, we may see verbal outbursts. We may see physical aggression. We may see slowing down and shutting down. And that's because this kink makes us feel the senses around us differently. We might feel them more intensely. We may not feel them as much. That we might just not get them right. Like we have a button in our hand. We don't know if it's a button or a penny because they're both like this about the same size and smooth. And so it can really just cause a ton of issues. And we don't always know that it's sensory, but including some sensory strategies throughout the day may actually help with a person's behaviors as they age. So on this next slide, again, these are handouts, so I don't expect you to be able to read everything that's on each one of these, but these are available in the resource library. And the first one talks all about proprioceptive input. And this is one of the first strategies or main strategies that I even use at the Adult Down Syndrome Center. And proprioceptive input is input into our muscles and joints. And so specifically individuals with Down syndrome, they have low muscle tone. And so it really can impact how they interpret this proprioceptive input. But this happens for all of us, not just individuals with Down syndrome. So this deep pressure input that you get through proprioceptive input is supposed to have a calming and organizing effect on the sensory nervous system. And it's supposed to lower our state of arousal, which helps with positive behavioral and emotional outcomes. And so you'll see when you have a chance to look at this resource that everyday activities like chores, vacuuming, wiping down counters, sorting laundry, all of that are ways to get proprioceptive input. Any kind of pushing or pulling activity. So if your loved one goes with you to the grocery store, having them push the cart, or maybe carrying the groceries in for you, or unloading the groceries, carrying the laundry. Any of these activities, again, are just natural ways to get proprioceptive input. You can also see in the middle page that joint compression is another way. So this is basically like doing a mini massage throughout the body. You start at the shoulder and you go to the elbow, the wrist, the fingers, and the thumb. And just like I said, like a little mini massage, you're squeezing 10 times at each joint, and it kind of helps reset the sensory system. So this is a great strategy, especially if individuals really like hugs, or that big bear hug, or being wrapped up in a blanket. You can do joint compression. You don't need any equipment. You just need your hands. It takes about 30 to 45 seconds. You really only have to do the upper body, because the lower body naturally gets this joint compression or this proprioceptive input from walking and standing. And then the third handout is actually just more affordable ways to find some sensory equipment, whether it's on Amazon, at Walmart, at Walgreens, whatever it might be. There are ways to find things so you don't have to use therapy catalogs. So one of the things that's really important for me to talk about is weighted products, especially weighted blankets. And so here you can see that this is a commercially available weighted blanket, which is great that you can find them everywhere now. I know Bed Bath & Beyond is closed, but I'm sure Overstock still carries it. On Amazon, I mean, you name it, you can get it. But the thing to remember is that with weighted products, they should be 7 to 10% of a person's body weight and not more. But it can be less if that's best. But many commercially weighted blankets advertise weights that are more than to that 7 to 10%. So Marianne, can you just hit advance once, because it'll put yep, perfect. So I do not want you to refer to those weight suggestions. This one is actually like 16 to 25% of a person's body weight on this specific blanket. The other thing, weighted blankets have been advertised a lot for sleeping with, or sleeping under. And if there's concerns with seizures or asthma or sleep apnea or even cardiac issues, it is not recommended to sleep under a weighted blanket. The other thing is, when it comes to sensory input, after about 20 minutes, our body tunes out input if it isn't causing pain or harm to us. So if you can think about those of you who maybe wear reading glasses and then you don't need them anymore and you put them on the top of your head, and then an hour later you have no idea where your reading glasses are because you can't feel them on your head anymore. That's the same thing. So your body tuned it out because it wasn't causing harm. And so when it comes to even weighted products or any kind of sensory diet, after a certain amount of time, our body just tunes it out because it doesn't need to focus on it anymore. So sleeping under a weighted blanket is not effective really, because after 20 minutes or so, it's not causing, or it's not allowing for the positive outcomes of the weighted blanket. So you can use a weighted blanket as part of the bedtime routine, have it available in case they happen to wake up and need to fall back asleep. And you also don't need a weighted blanket that's the size of the entire bed. A lot of times now you can get double size, queen size, whatever it is. And it doesn't need to be that large. The one I use in the clinic is about maybe 5 feet long and 3 feet wide. So if you have something that's that small and they can get out from under it very easily, then it's not going to be as harmful for them to sleep under. But again, just know that it's not necessary to sleep under a weighted blanket. And as a reminder, it's 7 to 10% of a person's body weight, not more, even though other websites might tell you differently. So here's just another graph about calming and alerting strategies for individuals with Alzheimer's disease. And so we would use calming strategies for someone who's really worked up. And then we would use alerting strategies for someone who might be slowing down or shutting down. And so again, you know your loved one best, and you'll know which of these is going to work best for them, depending on them, the sensory system that might be overwhelmed or underwhelmed, and then just things you have available in your home. This is obviously not an all-inclusive list, but just gives you some ideas. And so when it comes to a sensory diet, if we provide a sensory diet, some sensory activity for upwards of 20 minutes, but it can be less, every few hours, it is believed to help raise the threshold for that individual. So perhaps if it is the sensory system that is leading to some of these behavioral changes, and we incorporate this sensory diet regularly, every few hours throughout the day, we can build up their threshold so these little things that were causing the behaviors might not bother them so much. It's going to take something really, really big in order to upset them. We can incorporate the sensory diet before a stressful event. So again, when you're anticipating that there could be a behavior change because of something that could be triggering, providing some calming activity beforehand, again, might regulate their body enough so that they don't have the behavior change. You can also use some of these sensory strategies after they've maybe had this behavior change. If they've had get very agitated and they start to calm down, then maybe you want to use a sensory strategy to help them calm down even more. I obviously do not get into their space if they are agitated and trying to hurt themselves or someone else. Trying to give them that space first, but then once they start to relax a little bit, getting in there, doing the joint compression or wrapping them up in a blanket, or if they like aromatherapy, having some kind of aromatherapy smell or their favorite song or whatever it might be. This is just a list of some possible strategies. So that's it with sensory, even though I could talk about sensory for hours. So let's move on to visual supports. And the thing that's really great about visual supports is that they can help to provide or establish structure and routine. They can also lessen the battle between the caregiver and the person with intellectual disability, because then the visual becomes the bad guy, not the caregiver. And the thing about visual supports is that they're often misunderstood as childish, especially because a lot of individuals with IED used visual supports in school. And so as they age, they might think they're childish. But I want you to think about the app icons on your smartphone or the grocery list you keep. I mean, visual supports grow and change with all of us. And so they don't have to just be pictures. They can be words if the person can read. But they're really going to help with behaviors. So the next way that visual supports can help is to manage expectations. And so in the top, you see there's a first then visual. And so oftentimes when it comes to using first then, the first activity is the non-preferred task, and then the then is the preferred. So maybe they don't like to shower. You say first we're going to shower, then we're going to listen to music. Or first we're going to go to the doctor, and then you get time on your iPad, or whatever it might be that is their preferred and non-preferred activity. Just seeing that they have to do something, but they get kind of a reward after can be helpful. The lower visual just is that reminder of what you do in the bathroom. You're going to brush your teeth, floss, wash your face, and brush your hair. We know it can be challenging sometimes. Some people love to take showers, some people don't. So the one in the middle is kind of like a shower schedule. You can imagine that the 3 pictures at the bottom for the shower are on Velcro, and then there's Velcro in each of the date boxes. And so they decide they have to shower 3 times that week. What days do they want to shower? And so they've created their schedule. And then let's say Wednesday was one of the days. It's Wednesday. You're like, oh, today's a shower day. And so then you can even then offer choices. Do you want to shower in the morning, before breakfast, or do you want to shower after, before bed, or whatever it might be to work with your schedule? But again, if they're deciding when the shower is and then giving them some choices, it just helps them to have some control. And then the one on the far right just kind of talks about providing, those expectations of these are the things you need to do before you go downstairs. And so, I mean, it could be their daily schedule to manage expectations. It could be their hygiene schedule, whatever it might be, but it helps them know kind of what to do, and they don't have to think so much, because if we just said, get ready and come downstairs, they might just sit there for hours because they don't know all those steps they have to do. But if they know they have to get dressed, they have to use the restroom and wash their face and brush their teeth, then that helps them. Or it could even be, you tell them to get dressed and they just sit there. So then you might put put on your underwear, put on your pants, put on your shirt, put on your socks, put on your shoes, whatever it might be. You might have to break down the task into even simpler steps or smaller steps. Visual supports also help to provide reminders. And so the one on the far left is like an orientation booklet, but you can also do things like label their bedroom with their photo so that they know that that's theirs. You label the bathroom saying it's the bathroom. Because again, as they age, if they start to have some memory issues, they may not know which room is which. So you might see that they go in the closet to use the bathroom, or they're trying to go into somebody else's room. Maybe they like to call family members, and so you're providing reminders about who they can call and when, so that they're not constantly calling people. Using timers, either like this time timer, the timer on an oven, even apps. There's, apps that are timers would be really great. Maybe they need to drink more water. And so you just have that reminder of how many they're supposed to drink 6 glasses of water that day. And you check mark when they do it, or if it's the reminder for their medication, or could be the reminder for their favorite TV shows, so that you don't have to be the one that turns it on for them. Whatever it might be, you can provide visuals for that. And then visuals can also help maintain skills and independence, especially as someone may be losing these skills. So on the far right is a shower routine, reminding them of each step of the shower. Again, this is going to be different for everyone. In our resource library, we have it with all the steps so that you can print it off and put the pictures in the order you want to. It's great to laminate. You can hang it in the shower when it's laminated. Maybe it's the steps for using the restroom if they need those reminders. Just having a hygiene chart, reminding them of what they have to do and when, because some of these tasks that we don't do daily, those can all help maintain skills as they're starting to lose them. And then visuals can really help facilitate communication, because as one ages, they might lose their vocabulary or not have trouble with word finding. They might shut down a little bit. They just might want to be by themselves more, and so they aren't going to be talking. So having pictures to help them, because again, this is going to help hopefully eliminate some of the behavior challenges, because oftentimes we see behaviors when someone isn't able to communicate what they want. So having a list of things that they may want, or even the items, it doesn't have to be pictures. It could be the actual item. Have all of the things that they prefer near them so that they can just select it. Or there's that more of a communication board of all the things, just that they might say in common phrases, perhaps even just with their emotions. But again, if we can facilitate communication, we may see less of behavioral challenges. And then finally, there's just a few other communication strategies to think about. You want to provide simple instructions, and you also want to try to use fewer words, right? And so pictures can help with that. As a reminder, do not argue with them. You are not going to win. It's going to be more stressful for you if you're trying to argue with them. Try to avoid asking them if they're if they remember. Do you remember the time? Do you remember my name? Anything like that. Just smile. Try to remain calm. Don't raise your voice. Try to, speak calmly with a slow pace, and really get down on their eye level, so that they can see you, they know where the words are coming from, and it can just make for a more calming environment. And just don't ask too many questions of them, because that can be stressful for everybody. So with that, I did provide a list of resources. Again, our resource library has a variety of resources. If you want to follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or our email newsletter, but now is a great time for questions.
Great.
Katie, that was a wonderful, extremely informative presentation on behavioral changes that occur with aging and dementia. We're so appreciative of you taking your time and sharing your expertise with us. At this point, we'll begin to take participants' questions. Throughout your presentation, Kathy Service and Christine Nugent have been monitoring the Q&A and chat.
Okay.
Remember, if you have a question that you have not submitted, please enter it in the Q&A, and we will get through as many questions as time allows. We will now begin to read and respond to your questions that haven't been answered already.
Great. I'm so excited. I'll be doing the Q&A. I'm taking them directly from the Q&A list, and I just want to thank you. I'm always learning something, so the comments are great in here. So let's get with the questions. So how often do you see paranoia, hallucinations, and delusion?
Well, so as a non-medical doctor,
Okay.
I'm not so certain, but I do know that, I mean, we can see this. I can't talk about the frequency, but when this happens or when any change in behavior happens, the first thing you really want to rule out is any medical cause for this, because it is possible that you might see paranoia or hallucinations or delusions, and it's not, um, it could be related to they have sleep apnea and it was undiagnosed, or there was a change in their medication, or their thyroid's off or something like that. So I don't know the frequency, but if you see it, the first thing I would do would be to talk to your doctor to make sure there's not a medical cause for this, that it's not just because they're aging or because they have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease.
That's great. I know there are things. I know it with vision. There's this syndrome called Charles-Bonnet, which happens if you really have a lot of visual impairment. Thank you. Now, at what point in the disease, if people have Alzheimer's disease or any dementias, would you expect these different behaviors at all? I mean, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would say I am not an expert on Alzheimer's, so I'm sure someone who is would know the exact stage. But what I would say is that um, even without Alzheimer's and aging, there could be any of these behaviors that happen. And again, behavior is just a form of communication. And so we would still need to answer all of those questions and try to figure out what could be going on. And again, it might be a medical reason. It could be a traumatic event that we didn't know about. It could be that they have sensory issues. It could be that they're avoiding something, that they want attention. And so we could see any one of those behavior changes at any point, I think, in their life. And again, when we do, that's when we need to talk to a doctor to make sure, again, it's not a medical cause.
Right. Thank you. Now, and is tunnel vision. Have you heard any complaints about tunnel vision? And how's that different for people with Down syndrome versus the general population? Do you have any ideas about that?
In my understanding, I thought this was something that could happen for anyone with Alzheimer's, not just Down syndrome.
Okay, thank you. And do you know, I mean, are these strategies useful for somebody who may have a vascular dementia?
My guess is many of them probably could be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I agree, many of these things that you had listed are really beneficial for all of us who are aging. So, and as we're aging, and age being the biggest risk factor for some kind of a disease that causes dementia, that these are helpful throughout, and are really, especially as somebody is living with dementia. So if they're used to being very independent with their ADLs, and what changes do you make those tasks more difficult now? And does it make it difficult for them to be able to complete tasks that have multiple steps? It's more about, I think it has to do with the brain changes.
Yeah, so I would say that the changes in the brain are what's going to make it more difficult. So they're going to have more trouble with problem solving. They're just more confused. They have memory loss. And so these skills that used to be just innate that they just did just become more challenging. And so the fact that there's multiple steps to these tasks, again, kind of like when I explained, they used to be able, you could just say, get dressed, and they could do it, and it was never a problem. But then you might have to change it to telling them each piece of clothing they need to put on. And again, it's just because of the changes in the brain. And it can be very frustrating for that individual, especially if they're understanding that they're having more trouble. And again, that's where you might see some behaviors where they don't want to have help. And so there could be a time where you do the tasks for them, and then times when you have more flexibility where you allow them, even if it takes 2 hours, just to do it because it gives them a sense of accomplishment to be able to complete it. And so like a day you're not leaving the house, maybe you let them do all their self-care because there's no time commitment. But if they have to get out, then maybe you'll help speed them along or provide more assistance if they're willing to let you.
Now, is there a good source, I mean, for common visuals or good point, if you have to get visual tools, did you just go on Amazon, or how would you know what to pick?
I mean, I think it depends. We make visuals highly specific to the individual, and then we have some in our resource library that others can make as individualized as possible. But you can even like taking pictures of the actual items and then just putting them in a Word document or having them on your phone and you can just slide them are really cost-effective ways. I use Boardmaker, which is a website to create the visuals. Oftentimes, so that is a subscription that you pay, you can do monthly or annually. There are apps that can help you create visuals. And again, we have a resource in our resource library about the variety of apps you can use, whether it's using them for reminders or whatever, and so some are free apps that you can find. But again, using just actual pictures of things or it makes it even easier. You don't have to necessarily use Boardmaker.
Right. Okay. Now, what's your take on using Montessori methods with people with dementia, or or Alzheimer's disease? I know it's being, some people do it. I mean, there's a lot of work being done, and there are people who specialize in that. What's your take on any of this?
I have not actually thought about it as much with individuals as they age, but I do know that just using the Montessori strategies for individuals with perhaps cognitive deficits, intellectual disabilities as they're younger is really, really a positive experience. So I don't know that I actually have a good answer for that, but I'm glad that people are looking into it and doing research.
Yeah, great. And I mean, there's a question here about any tips for those who don't want assistance with the disposable briefs, changing them.
Oh,
That's a hard one.
well, I wonder if, and I don't know if it's male or female, but I wonder if using like period panties instead, because it would be harder with bowel movements, but then they could feel like they're using regular underwear and it's wicking away, and then they maybe only have to change it at night. Perhaps, because you can get them that have different absorbencies. I wonder if that could work.
Okay. Well, I got one more question here, and I just wanted to kind of clarify. Do you have an opinion on the use of tapping? And I'm not even sure. I know there's things that people can do, for, oh God, what is that? The person who wrote it, maybe you can put a little bit of something more in the Q&A, but maybe what we can do is save that for our Katie, and we can maybe look to answer these questions. Katie's going to help us answer the rest of the questions that were not answered, and everybody will get them. So that's something that we can do. And maybe the person in the meantime, can you just write something in the Q&A to help us kind of focus what you mean by tapping?
I'm wondering if it's like stimming. And so whether it's stimming, like, so if it's tapping like their hand or their feet or leg, whatever, another part of the body. But if not, but even with stimming, I don't think stimming's a bad thing. As long as it's not hurting themselves or someone else or keeping them from being able to do what they want or need to do.
Okay, great. And that's, we don't have any time for further ones, but of course I have tons of questions, but I think we'll wait and you'll answer the questions that you didn't answer now. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. They awesome questions and terrific answers. And if there are additional questions that anyone has, again, please place them in the Q&A. And also you feel free to email us. From my understanding, there are some people that are asking about some of the resources that Katie Frank offered. It was placed in the Q&A. I'm going to go back to that slide again. I'm going to leave it there for a moment. But again, they will be in the Q&A so that you can copy them there, that Christine Nugent has kindly placed there. And I'm also, when people have an opportunity to finish collecting the resources here, I'm going to share with you some resources that NTG has and also display for you our QR code for the survey, which is not the same QR code that you're viewing right now. What you're viewing now takes you to the resources that Katie has offered to share with us. Okay, so a few more seconds and then I'll move on to the NTG resources. Okay, so NTG does have a variety of resources for families as well as professionals. So I'm just displaying a screenshot of what it will look like when you go there, as well as the link. And I believe Christine Nugent has been kind enough to put that into the Q&A and chat as well for your convenience. They're continued again on the second slide. Again, the resources that you might find valuable offered by NTG. And in addition to our resources, we do have the virtual monthly support group. And as mentioned before, Kathy serves as our facilitator, and I continue to join the group, sharing my lived experiences. And that information is here. It meets the first Thursday of every month at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. And again, it's virtual and open to families and family caretakers. Okay, so this is the link to the survey as well as a QR code. And we have special thank you to Katie Frank again for being our presenter. And information will be forthcoming on when the recording will be available, as well as the one-page summary that will be forthcoming. I will come back to the screen in just a moment. And the very last screen, again, is a reminder that our final 5th webinar in this family series will be 2 weeks from today on Tuesday, April 23rd. One difference is it will be an hour and a half, 90 minutes from 1 to 2:30 Eastern Time. And the topic is sharing family experiences and perspectives from 3 panelists. Okay, I'm going to go back to the survey link and QR code. And once again, if you have any additional questions, feel free to put them into the Q&A or email us at the family support email address. We thank everybody so much for spending time with us. And I know that everybody will have found the presentation very valuable. For the presenters and hosts, if you would be kind enough to remain on, and then shortly afterwards, we will join another link to debrief.
Thank you for being with us. Thank you.